UK Special Forces sit at the sharpest end of British power, the quiet edge that turns when politics runs out of patience and conventional forces would make too much noise. If you strip away the myths, the movie fantasies, and the knowing nods in pub conversations, you land on something simple and a little unsettling. These are small teams with outsized consequences. They move when ministers need options that do not trigger headlines, and they succeed when no one even knows they were there. So before we go any further, park the Hollywood imagery. This is not about capes or catchphrases. It is about selection courses that break spirits, radios that cannot fail, pilots who fly in the margins of what machines can handle, and operators who do more with 12 people than some brigades manage with hundreds. Start with the unit everyone names first, the Special Air Service, the regiment the enemy rarely sees and never forgets. Born in the chaos of the North African desert in the Second World War, disbanded when peace returned, then resurrected when the British Empire discovered that peace had arrived in name only. The modern SAS is the archetype of a Tier 1 unit built for strategic effect. Behind enemy lines, high-value targets, hostage rescue, denial of critical infrastructure, that is the language. The footprint is small, the planning is obsessive, and the selection process is designed to filter for one thing above all else: resolve under pressure. The Brecon beacons do not negotiate. The jungle phase does not care about confidence. Interrogation resistance is not a classroom drill. Most candidates fail because the course is not looking for ordinary toughness. It is looking for the handful who will keep going when every useful instinct says, stop. When they pass, they join Sabre squadrons built for speed and precision, surveillance, direct action, counter-terror at home and abroad. The motto is short for a reason: who dares wins. It is not a slogan for t-shirts. It is a threat to any network that thinks distance and denial are shields. But the UK's shadow toolbox is not a one-trick story. If the SAS dominates on land, the Special Boat Service owns the approaches that water allows. Think boarding actions in Blackwater, divers sliding under hulls, beach recce in the hours when the tide and the timetable finally agree. The SBS draws heavily from Royal Marines commandos, which means a baseline of amphibious aggression and a culture where the sea is not a barrier, it is a highway. Selection mirrors the SAS in pain and attrition, but pushes cold, current, and confined spaces in a way that rejects anyone who does not respect water. Maritime hostage rescue, ship takedowns, literal raids, stealth insertions by canoe, subsurface sabotage. Everyone talks about the door kicking at dawn. Fewer people understand the quiet hours that make dawn possible. That is where the SBS lives most of the time. Now for the unit most viewers have heard of, but could not pick out of a lineup: the Special Reconnaissance Regiment. The SRR is less about glory and more about patience. Disguise, dead drops, cover stories, long static hides that hurt your back, and your belief that time still moves forward. They track people that other agencies cannot reach and map networks that do not exist on paper. Often unarmed, often in plain clothes, always under a layer of risk that does not advertise itself. Their size is classified because everything about them points away from the spotlight. Without their eyes, the rest of the machine swings in the dark. With their eyes, the difference between a good plan and a clean success narrows to seconds. Of course, it is one thing to stand still in the wire and whisper into a mic. It is another to bring muscle when the whisper turns into a green light. That is the Special Forces Support Group. The SFSG is a hybrid of elite infantry and airfield assault specialists, paratroopers, Royal Marines, and RAF regiment elements built into a single battalion that does the hard, fast, and heavy tasks that would drag a small special operations troop off mission. Cordon and search, outer cordon security, blocking forces, quick reaction, fire support that hits like a hammer. If SAS and SBS are the rapier, SFSG is the shield that can punch. But edge and muscle do not matter if you cannot talk, listen, jam, or spot the signal that gives away an ambush. Enter 18 UKSF Signal Regiment, the unit that runs the digital bloodstream for every mission. Secure communications, data links that survive mountains, cities, and the kind of weather that kills batteries and confidence. Electronic warfare support that can blind a room without scratching the wall. If you picture a signaler in a tent, update the image. Laptops on the move, antennas that look like nothing, keyboards and carbines in the same rucksack. When everything else turns to static, these are the people who keep the line alive. And none of this gets to the target without air crews who accept that low, fast, and quiet is not just a technique. It is the difference between getting in and getting memorialized. The Joint Special Forces Aviation Wing is built from RAF and Army Air Corps pilots and crews who fly the blacked-out approaches that standard flight plans do not teach. Chinooks stuffed with kit and a troop that has rehearsed every step. Pumas threading valleys on night vision, fixed wing insertion when distance says no, and the mission says too bad. These crews absorb the same pressure and accept the same anonymity. When the mission starts or ends in the sky, they make sure there is a beginning and an end to talk about. Put these pieces together, and you get a tri-service command that has evolved from ad hoc raiders to a permanent instrument of national policy. After 9/11, as the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq rolled forward, special operations went from niche to necessary. The United States built a global counter-terror machine with Joint Special Operations Command at its core. The UK partnered deeply, and it showed. Kill or capture missions at a speed the enemy could not match. Local partners trained, equipped, and pushed forward while drones, jets, and small British detachments shaped the battlefield from the shadows. Names were rarely released. Results were felt in safe houses that were not safe anymore. As budgets tightened and public patience for large interventions evaporated, UK Special Forces did not shrink. They became the solution when conventional deployments were politically toxic. Secrecy increased. Accountability became a debate in Parliament that rarely went anywhere. Critics argued that low visibility creates low oversight. Supporters pointed to outcomes that did not require a flag over a base and a brigade on the ground. Both sides had a point. What is not in dispute is the growth in funding and attention. Equipment budgets climbed. A battalion was re-rolled to provide permanent support. The director of Special Forces became a major general. Then officers with that background climbed higher still. When the head of the British Army has worn the SAS Sandy Beret, you know where the institution sees future value. There is more. The last decade has shown that you can fly less, deploy fewer battalions, and still project influence by combining specialists, precision air power, and local partners. Call it remote warfare if you like. The concept predates the branding. The SAS wrote a chapter on it in the Darfur insurgency in Oman. Raise a local force, train it hard, partner it with aircraft and a small British footprint. Let it do the pushing. That model has returned in new forms from North Africa to the Middle East. It works best when the political end state is clear and the host nation has a future beyond the firefights. It works worst when killing a problem is easy and building a solution is ignored. So, where is UKSF now, and where is it going? The terrorist threat has not vanished. Domestic counter-terror remains a duty that sits close to home, with police marksmen taking the first call and a specialist SAS team on rotation for the nightmare scenarios. Abroad, the networks that morphed from one flag to another have not stopped learning. Training missions, partnered raids, and surgical strikes will persist wherever safe havens grow in the cracks of weak states. Yet, there is another pivot underway, and it is not subtle. The challenge from states that prefer to compete without declaring it has forced a rethink. Hybrid activity, gray zone pressure, call it what you want. It is the space where intelligence, disinformation, cyber intrusion, deniable proxies, and little green men try to change facts on the ground, while lawyers argue over definitions. That is where the SRR's talents become frontline, finding the people who run the networks, mapping money, meetings, and message traffic. Feeding a target list that can become arrests by a friendly government or more discreet removals when the legal path is blocked by the same ambiguity the adversary hides behind. It is not just about Russia, though that is the obvious example. Any state that prizes disruption over open battle falls into this frame. If you can win early, silently, and legally, you might avoid a crisis that would drag alliances to the edge. That is the promise. The risk is equally clear. Operate on Allied soil, and you had better cooperate, deconflict, and respect rules that keep democracies different from the adversaries they face. The lesson from past night raids and other wars is simple. Tactical success can sour if allies feel sidelined or civilians pay the price. Special forces know this. The good ones plan for it. Selection matters here as much as it did on that first hill in Wales. The intake is drawn from units that already filter hard. Parachute Regiment, Royal Marines, a few others that live in high readiness. 3 years minimum in uniform before you even apply. 7 months of selection with failure rates that would close a civilian course for fear of lawsuits. Women have made their mark in roles where blending in beats breaking down doors. Signals experts live in a world where a dropped packet can be as dangerous as a dropped magazine. Pilots rehearse profiles that swallow the margins of safety. None of this is theatrical. It is procedural. That is why it works. Money trails help tell the story. While the rest of the armed forces reduced headcount and reset ambitions, UK Special Forces gained kit and tasks, extra billions for equipment, additional injections to bring units to strength, a command structure that matured into a permanent pillar. The argument was blunt. If the public will not tolerate large wars of choice, the state needs tools that work in silence. Those tools are not cheap, but they are cheaper than brigades on rotation and hospitals full of wounded. Whether that equation holds over time depends on strategy, not just tactics. If the political aim is a sentence you can say in one breath, Special Forces can help end the paragraph. If the aim is a feeling or a hope, even perfect raids become expensive punctuation without a story to support them. That takes us back to the map no one sees on television. Pins in North Africa, pins in the Gulf, pins in places that rarely make it into tourist guides. Some pins mark training grounds, some mark routes for things that should not move. Some mark people who believe distance and darkness protect them. The UK will continue to act in those spaces, often at the request of friends who cannot afford to act alone. Sometimes in line with coalitions, sometimes singly, because speed beats committee meetings. There is one more reality to face. Secrecy protects operators, sources, and outcomes. It also protects mistakes from scrutiny. The British government has long preferred to say nothing about UKSF. That will not change soon. Parliament will ask questions. Reporters will dig. Rare inquests will break the fourth wall. The public will get glimpses through stories of heroism and allegations of excess. You do not need to resolve that tension to understand the capability. You only need to recognize what it is for. Small teams, strategic moments, political bandwidth created by quiet success. So, when you hear the acronyms, do not just tick a mental box. SAS for the raid that nobody names, SBS for the ship that changes hands before breakfast, SRR for the eyes that saw it coming, SFSG for the ring of steel that keeps the assault clean, 18 UKSF Signal Regiment for the heartbeat that keeps the network alive, Joint Special Forces Aviation Wing for the ride in and the ride out when neither is guaranteed. Together, they are not a legend, they are a method. And inside that method sits the core idea that defines the whole enterprise. If you can reach far with few, decide clearly, and act before the other side even realizes the rules have shifted, you can change outcomes without changing the flag on the embassy. That is the inside of the shadows. That is how every UK Special Forces unit fits, overlaps, and amplifies the others. It is not flashy because flashy gets people killed. It is not loud because loud invites company you do not want. It is professional, relentless, and designed for a world where the hardest problems do not announce themselves. If you came for certainty, you came to the wrong part of the map. If you came to understand how Britain holds options when options are running out, you are exactly where you need to be.